I see Pierre Durand, who's also a speaker. So we have in this group four talks. And I think if it's okay, Eva, I will start with you if you're all right, and then I would go to the team from the University of Burgundy, also with their colleague Shenzhen Su from Fujian Catholic University in Taipei, Taiwan, and then the third speaker will be Pierre Durand, and I don't know if André Suchet is here. And then I will finish off the fourth talk, and then we will take questions and comments. So please use the chat as an opportunity to think about questions for the future and or write them down. This way we can get through all of the presentations and then make certain that we have an opportunity to have an open forum of questions and communication, if that is okay with everyone. I see Pierre. Pierre, can I get a thumbs up that it's okay?
Yeah, sounds good for me.
Okay, and Professor Bouchet, is that okay with you? Excellent. Okay, and Eva, are you okay beginning with us? Because I see that you're off screen now.
Hello, everyone. I am ready, and I try to share my screen. Actually, good morning to Berkeley, to Derek.
Thank you. Good to see you.
So I hope this is the one. Please, can you see it?
It looks great. Looks great.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, my name is Eva Schwarzoffova, and I work as a professor assistant teacher at PalackyUniversity at the Department of Leisure Studies in the Czech Republic. And I would like to present briefly my contribution for this year's 7th IRNIST Sport Tourism Conference about behavior of active participants, sport tourists during the stay at the Runfest event, half marathon. One example which is held every year in the Czech Republic. So small-scale events like a running race can significantly contribute to a local community and economy, and help to promote the city of region, hosting it as a touristic destination. The aim of my contribution is to present some of results of my research about the event, active participants and their consumer behavior in relation to their use of tourism services during the stay in the destination, which is the third biggest city in the Czech Republic, named Ostrava, located in the north of our country, very close to the Polish and Slovak border. And I have also focused on consumption behavior related to the tourism services and using these service facilities such as accommodation, transport, dining. And I examine also two another items such as satisfaction with these services and also intention of this participant to come back to this destination, to visit the destination sometimes in the future again. So now briefly about literature review. As you can see, I pay attention or I focus on the four main topics, which were first of all sport tourism. Then I review the literature about sport event. I focus on sport event as a tourist attraction, either as a attraction itself or as part of a cluster of many attractions. And also we can define sport event as a tourist product which consists many of components, and I focus of the components which are connected with tourism services. The third topics or third theme, it's connected, it's connection between sport tourism and event tourism. So reviewed literature about sport event tourism, which is one of the category of sport tourism. And at the least, I focus on the consumer behavior of these tourist participators. And as considered Mike Wieg in his book from 2009, the sport tourist participating is the second most substantial research area within the sport tourism after the researching and understanding the impact, social or economic impact of sports event. Because I am presenting the running event, I also research some studies or books or literature generally, which is addressed to this topic about either the major event or local small scale event specialized in trail running or distance running, or the running is the part of collection of description of many events in some particular destination. So this is the some review, according my opinion, the very good studies. So now I would like to briefly introduce the own event. Here I present this event by the nickname Runfest event. The race was first organized in 1923, so has relatively long tradition, and it's also known under the name Ostrava City Marathon. This is after the very famous and biggest running race, which caused Czech Run, what I presented during the IRNIST Conference in Zagreb in 2016. I would say the third and fourth, the biggest, or actually the small scale running sport event. And as you can see, they call themselves that this is the running festival in the center of Ostrava, mixture of movement and fun. This running event contains for main discipline, which is marathon, half marathon, quarter marathon, that's mean 10 kilometers, and relay race 6 times 6 kilometers. And the program includes also the special run for charity and special kids run, or run for kids and children or families run. So the approximate registered number of participants, it's 2,000 for a marathon, and between 460 to 540 for half marathon. This is the one-day event, and it take place in September every year in the urban area of city of Ostrava. This study was designed to investigate the characteristic of active participants and the consumer behavior connected with their stay at the destination. The data was collected by survey, which was conducted among the 470 runners participating in the half marathon in this running race. And we collected data after the finish of this half marathon event in September 2018. The respondents were closely randomly. The survey was adopted from our previous research conducted during the Run Czech half marathon in Olomouc. The survey consists of 15 questions divided in 3 sections. It was socio-demographic data, evaluation of the event, that means the items and factors about organizing, and if they are recreational or active runners, etc. And the third part was addressed to travel and tourism services, respective to the consumption and consumption behavior during the consumption of these services and using the facilities who provides these services. Due to specificity of sport tourism, the research took into account this specific aspect of travel and tourism services. And finally, we collected data of, or the sample was the sample of 172 active participants, consisted of those who fully completed the survey. So on this slide, you can see this first result, actually the characteristic of sample of respondents. As I mentioned, it was finally operated with 172 respondents. Again, I would like to point that they were only the athletes, the active participant of this event. We didn't ask about age because this data we can get from the registered list. Approximate age for women it's 39, for men athletes 46 years. So the vast majority, according to gender, were of course the men's, the runners, but relatively big proportion was also the women's runners. According to the nationality, the structure, the majority was Czech runners. And I would like to point it that from this 83% was 70% the local runners, which means the runners who commute like very close distance, either direct from the city or the Moravian Silesian region, or from the region which are located in surroundings, so other Moravian regions. For example, I live approximately 100 kilometers from this city of Ostrava, but administratively, I am in another different region. I live in different region. As you can see, there were about 70% of foreigner participants, almost from the Slovakia and Poland, because this is the city is located close to these two republics. And according to the registered list, there were also participants from another European or overseas country. but they were not included in our sample of respondents. So, as I mentioned, the survey had 3 parts. We asked about how many times they already took participation in this event. So you can see that 49% of participants were taking part in the race for the first time, 39% had previously taken part in the race, and 11% had participated 4 or more times in this event. The question about about with whom they arrived or they visited this event. The results are that most runners arrived as a part of an organized group, for example, the athletes group, and also the second third of sample came accompanied by their family, which is relatively important for the impact because we assume that the runners accompanied with the family stay overnight and use through tourism services than only athletes who arrive by themselves. Also 22% came with friends or with some partner, and the rest said they stated that they came unaccompanied. Now the results about using the services. Overnight stays and use of the accommodation facility, 87% did not declare that they did not spend the night in the destination. That means that they left shortly after the event. 12% took advantage of local accommodation facility, and on the right side you can see the main types of accommodation facility what they used. That means mostly the hotel, then the private accommodation, and that means in the private rooms, or they use Airbnb and then hostel or dormitory. Now question about dining and spending. 53% of respondents brought their own food, 24% of respondents choose to eat at buffet or other fast food establishment, and almost 22% ate at the restaurants or the restaurants facility. Participants' spendings per day were in 38% respondents reporting spending between 15 and 30 euros. Then 56% spend less than 15 euros, while 22% of respondents spend between 30 to 60 euros per day. Only 3.5% reported spending more than 60 euro per day. As for the quality of tourist services, most reported they were rather 54% or very satisfied. This is 22.4%. So that means that almost 3/4 of questioned respondents were satisfied. Then another 9% were not satisfied, while 14% said that they had not made use of these services, just could not make an evaluation. So very important for the destination as a one of the economic and social impact from organizing and hosting this event. It's the intention of participant, not only the active participant, but also the spectators, their likelihood of returning back to the destination. So that was the important part of my study, to examine the participant satisfaction and willingness to visit the city as a tourist destination again in the future. Through knowledge of the sport visitors' connection with the destination is important. To repeat visitation is to be realized. So the key findings is that 62.6% of respondents indicated that they would like or they are intent to come back to this destination. We didn't ask if it's direct to city or just region, outskirts, but back to destination. And 10% were uncertain, and there is less than 2% they indicated no intention to come back. So I would like to conclude these results of my study or my contribution now, that the results have confirmed a growing level of interest in sporting events. One of the results of the research is the finding that despite the large number of participants attending the race, the number of those who stay overnight is relatively small. On the other hand, a significant number of participants ate in restaurants, and they boost or enhance the business in small businesses in the downtown center. Furthermore, the research considered the willingness and intention of participants to travel and to participate in this running event repeatedly, as well as their interest in visiting the Ostrava and Moravian region as a touristic destination again. So I would like to thank you for your attention, for time, and I'm looking forward for possible questions and discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eva. That was very interesting. I see that my friend and colleague, Dr. Claude Sobre, is on the Zoom. He and I and Ricardo Mello wrote a book this year about comparing half marathons in 3 continents and 9 countries. And I see, there it is, there's the book. And I see that my friend, Dr. Irena Stepikova, and Pavel Slepika, they wrote a book on the Matoni half marathon, which is in, I can't pronounce it in Czech, but Ústí nad Labem. So it'll be very interesting if she has questions at the end to ask how it might compare 2 different half marathons in the Czech Republic. And also thank you, Irina, for being such a gracious host to me in Prague. I'm going to turn it over to Professor Dr. Patrick Bouchet to talk about the next presentation on proximity tourism and outdoor spaces. It is entitled Domestic Tourist Experience in Protected Natural Parks, a New Trend in Pandemic Crisis. So please welcome Dr. Patrick Bouchet.
Thanks, Derek. Eva, can you stop to share your computer, please?
Yes, please. I am trying. Sorry,
Thanks.
I'm really trying.
No problem. No problem.
Stop share. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is it okay for you?
Yeah, looks great.
Okay. Thanks. So now I am going to present quickly a collaborative research with my colleagues Anne-Marie Lebrun from France and Chen Zhensu from Taiwan. This presentation, the content of this presentation is classical with 6 points. The first one is the context and the goal of the study. The second, the literature review. The third part is about the research model and hypothesis, and after methods, the result, and in final discussion and conclusion. So, the context and the goal of the study. One of the consequences of the COVID-19 outbreak has been the boosting of proximity tourism, whether within the country, domestic tourism in a region, or in some part of the border area between one's home country or neighboring states. Another major consequence of the pandemic crisis has been the development of active leisure in outdoor spaces, less conducive to the spread of the virus during holidays or vacation, especially in natural parks nearby to his home. In this context, what are the experiences of domestic tourists during their stays in protected natural parks? Are they the same nature as experience of less constrained holidays in more distant destinations? Protected natural parks are often for more active activities demanding a high level of intensity, such as hiking, cycling, sailing, diving, running, and also more passive activities, such as visiting local museums, food, or beverage tasting message. Pine and Gilmore's first theoretical framework can offer an appropriate model to understand one's state experience is one or all of the four realms: education, escapism, aesthetics, or entertainment, including visitors' participation, active or passive. The goal of this study is to better understand the experience lived by domestic tourists in France when they visited a protected and free natural park during short or long stay in their country. A few months ago, domestic holidays might have been considered old-fashioned, but a revival now seems to be taking shape amidst the pandemic crisis. Domestic tourists come from neighboring areas for a weekend, a short stay, or an overnight or same-day trip. Domestic tourism often takes place in a context that is relatively close to or even the same as one's familiar everyday environment. But domestic tourism is a neglected topic in the literature, while it is actually more important than inbound tourism for many European countries. Understanding the nature of tourism experience has become a challenge for managers or diverse touristic contexts, theme parks, museums, rural territories, nature-based tourism. Park managers strive to provide opportunities to live arousal and memorable experience in order to improve ultimate satisfaction for visitors or the quality of their products. In protected natural parks setting, tourist experience a specific place in which the experience is multidimensional and unique for each situation and each consumer. Yet, little is known about how experiences are concretely lived in protected natural parks in relation to a set of possible activities involving both passive and active participation, and the kind of links that may exist between visitors' arousal and memorable outcomes. Pine and Gilmore's theoretical framework offers a model on how experiences are categorized in four realms, including consumers' participation, active or passive. But there is no study using this model with our arousal and memory outcomes applied to protected natural parks, which are more familiar for domestic tourists. Finally, it is necessary to measure the effectiveness of the forest model on arousal and memory outcome in a protected natural park where diverse experiences, extraordinary or ordinary, passive or active, coexist in a single space to respond to the different preferences of domestic tourists living nearby. Then we built this model with independent variables with the four realms of experience: education, escapism in active experiences, and aesthetics and entertainment in passive experience, and 2 dependent variables, memory and arousal outcome. With this model, we are testing the influence of the 4 realms of experience on arousal and memory outcomes, and also we are comparing active and passive tourist participation on arousal and memory outcomes. The method. Our topic is applied on the Morvan Natural Park, which is near Dijon, capital of the Burgundy, and Paris, 2 hours. The Morvan Park boasts a highly terrain in which visitors find clean air and fresh water, lakes and rivers, and it is also famous for its coniferous forest producing Christmas trees for France. 500 questionnaires of domestic tourists were usable, meaning complete and without missing values. A large percentage of respondents were repeat visitors. The sample was divided almost equally between overnight and same-day tourists and between males and females. The survey questionnaire was composed of 4 sections. The first one is about the question regarding visiting, first or multiple, to the Morvan Park, and the visitor source of information regarding. The second section is about the experience scale, referring to a forest model and adapt to fit the natural park experience. The third section is about the item measuring arousal and memorable experience and outcome of the emotional experience induced by Morvan Park. And the last section is demographic information, including gender, age, marital status, and education background. The analysis were conducted in 2 times. First times with the descriptive statistics with the EFR and the correlation table were compiled using SPSS. And to validate the hypothesis, a structural equation model was used, including relationship between the dimension of experience and arousal and memory outcome. Now the results. First result, very interesting. There is no aesthetic dimension. Only 3 dimensions were validated: education, escapism, and entertainment by the EFA. This result, is not consistent with previous studies using the forest model, which show that aesthetics dimension is highly important in an outdoor context. This result can be explained either by the sample, in which 95% of the respondents were repeat visitors, or by the items that were not adapted to the aesthetics experience of protected natural park. Also, the final model without aesthetic dimension is validated. All square correlation are lower than the value of the raw convention validity index, thus confirming discriminant validity. The measurement model first showed that the 3 dimensions of experience positively influence arousal. So result validate hypothesis 1 and but not validate 1A1 to 1A3 and hypothesis 1B1 and hypothesis 1 to hypothesis 1 to B3, but not validated hypothesis 1A4 and 1B4. These results were not consistent with the 6 previous research studies measuring the influence of the forest model on memory and arousal. Morvan Park is a rural and forested area that does not differ from the surrounding rural landscape for the domestic tourists living nearby. Consequently, the lack of aesthetic dimension for these tourists could be explained either by the specific context or by mismatching of items in an OAL sky. To answer to the hypothesis 2, all models were found have a good overall fit to the data. Education is a higher experience dimension than entertainment. This will validate the hypothesis 2, A1 and B1. And the entertainment is a higher experience dimension than escapism, regarding arousal memory, which did not validate hypothesis 2, A3 and 2, B3. Probably due to the fact that Morvan Park is a nature-based nature-based experiential context and an outdoor playground, education and entertainment are the two most important experience dimensions. To discuss and conclude this research. Theoretically speaking, this study analytically extends the forest model in the direction of low arousal and mundane experience for domestic tourists in a protected natural parks, but without the aesthetics dimension. Methodologically speaking, this study questions the scale of all and colleagues for protected natural parks with domestic tourists through the number of items, the use of EFA, and the removal of the aesthetic dimension. It will be advisable to modify and adapt the aesthetic dimension, specifically 2 items, less linked to the aesthetic characteristics of natural parks, especially for those including forests and lakes in a rural area. The finding of this research can help managers to better implement specific marketing strategy in the natural park sector, especially in pandemic crisis context with more domestic tourists. The development of domestic travel since last year will probably lead the way to more proximity tourism next year, especially if countries continue to impose strict health measures and limit international travel. It will be interesting to promote more authentic and more specific local holidays with services developing nature or outdoor activities and ecotourism. Park manager can also promote more familiar experiences for domestic tourists with creative and repetitive pleasure through the discovery of their own limits, new sensation, new playgrounds. Despite the maintenance of strict sanitary conditions, more local and sustainable tourism in which encounters, culture, and leisure activity will have a prominent place, will allow domestic visitors to travel less far, less often, but better and safer. In view of the health constraint imposed by the pandemic, the establishment of an effective communication system will contribute to the recovery of the domestic tourism market. New innovation and digital services should be proposed in protected natural parks, new individual or collective protection equipment, enabling compliance with health regulation by facilitating exchange, visits, and experiences. Creation of innovating solutions for digitizing events, monuments, museums, and sites with virtual or augmented reality services. And finally, digital, geolocalization, and verified promotion of tourist, leisure, and cultural services was where possible. This study are a lot of limitations. New studies should be conducted of other types of natural parks, such as forest, rural, to provide external validity of these results, and also to confirm the interest in Pine-Gilmore's model and its applied scale in the analysis of the visitor experience and in predicting arousal and memory outcomes. It will be beneficial to better identify the influence of the more active versus more passive or reactive axis on visitors' participation with impact of physical involvement and also mental involvement inside natural parks or the leisure sport notion. Finally, in the real context of pandemic crisis, it will be interesting to analyze the manager's strategy to adapt or not direction for domestic tourists beyond the respect of health risk management rules. Thank you for your attention. Just mention that this presentation has just been published in the Journal of Outdoor Recreation and Tourism. So if you want to have more information, you can read it after this conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Bouchet. Really interesting. I'm looking forward to talking to you more and asking questions about the model. I may reference it when I'm giving my talk too. I think that's great. We had a very good statistical and quantitative study that we've just seen, and I think that Pierre Durand from the University of Bordeaux is going to be giving a study on the analysis of strategies in the action sports industry, the case of two groups, Boardriders and Groupe Rossignol. And I think the study is qualitative, so this will be interesting. Please welcome Pierre Durand. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen. Let me know if it's good, like this. Right, I think it's good. So thanks everyone. Hi everyone, and thank you to be here for listening this presentation. Today we present this contribution about, as you said, the analysis of strategy in the action sports industry, the case of two groups, the Boardriders and Rossignol groups. To my concern, I'm a PhD student and I'm finishing my PhD this year. I'm in my third year of study. During the presentation, I will simply follow the scientific approach and start by the research question here. And the research question is the result of field experiences that led us to note a certain particularity in the management of outdoor and action sports companies in the industry of sports goods. We decided to target two major players in the field, the Boardriders and the Rossignol groups. There are two multinationals that represent very well the alternative sports in connection with the nature. So Boardriders includes the brands that you may know as Quicksilver, Roxy, and even DC Shoes. So basically it targets every sport from the Californian culture. And on the other hand, the Rossignol has a brand like Dynastar, Fed Bicycle, or Lunge that produce more equipment for the outdoor and the mountain. Regarding our theoretical framework, the first step was to determine the appropriate term to speak about the sports represented on this image. So should we talk about outdoor sports or outdoor recreation? That was a question that we tried to solve with an epistemological approach. So first, the study proposed a reflection on the terminology concerning the different terms that we find on this subject. This research analyzes 70 documents and articles, books, theses, and interprets the different language that we can use in this works. So we conclude that a conceptual language is according to the situation, because indeed the choice of the words rely firstly on the field of analysis concerned. For example, in the French term, which is APPN, is useful when it concerns school and educational environment, but is not for the business or management of companies. So it is important for the researcher to adapt the terminology according to the situation. We focus then on the theory to analyze management and organizational change, and here the structural contingency appears to be much appropriate. Indeed, we consider to consider the influence of contextual factors and explain the formation of corporate structures. Several researchers have used and proved the relevance of this theory. It offers a systematic vision that is open on the environment and which is quite consistent in the sports that we analyze. Theorists are numerous and their contributions are diverse, but we focus more on the contingency factors brought by Mintzberg and revisited by Nizey-Pichot. There are three of them that we kept: the influence of the age and size of company, the influence of technology about technical system and the way to produce, and the influence of the environment. So to complement the theory regarding sports management, we propose here to adapt the contingency theory to the specific domain of the sporting goods industry by adding a fourth factors, the cultural and sporting contingency. We rely here especially on Sensolio contributions regarding corporate culture, but also on Gasparini about the sports culture and Perrin-Malter about the places and the sports area. So now that we have in this theoretic part, we approach the problematic, because in the action sports industry, the big organization have to rethink their operation because of a maturing market. Then how can we consider the sports, its culture, and the sports area in the strategy of this industry? Three types of hypotheses have been developed for this research. the sociocultural evolution of the sports and his influence on the structuration of the groups. And the second and the third one that are more precise for sports here, the link between strategy and sports area and the impacts of sports culture regarding the management. About methodology, several collection of information have been collected. First, the written sources, around 650 documents. Then it has been complemented by oral sources with 27 interviews, 10 from Boardriders Group, 11 from Rossignol Group, and 6 from external actors. So let's move on the results, and I will start by presenting the first case study, Rossignol Group. And firstly, Rossignol is a French brand that was born in the French Alps in 1907, thanks to the initiative of Abel Rossignol, who was a carpenter and produced his first ski mainly for the army. He then created a company which was bought in 1976 by Mr. Boisvive here, who reinvested in the company because she was going through a bad period. Everything is going fine until the 1880s, but around that time, the ski resort in France started recording poor snowfall rates, and it affected a lot the commercial activity of Rossignol. That's why the company felt that it was essential to diversify his activity, and they start progressively to buy several different brands. They start to buy first the Lange company, which is producing ski boots. Then they oriented the activity on another kind of sports, the golf. And then they bought also the Lux company, which is producing bindings for skis. But unfortunately, the economic situation is not good during the following years. So Rossignol is looking for a way to recover. That's why Mr. Boisvive gets closer to the group Quicksilver, which at that time records very good results. The American brands show ambitions and buys the Rossignol groups in 2005, but the things went very badly after this association. Indeed, the maturity of the sector, the low snowfall rates, and the clash between two different cultures led the both entities to separate very fastly in 2008. After this tragic event, Rossignol goes under the control of an investment fund that turned around the business company in only 5 years. There was a deep restructuration with a significant reduction in the workforce. They made some tough decisions to regenerate the business and sell the company to another investment fund in 2030. This new investment fund is Altor Equity Partner, which is Norwegian and takes the control of the capital at this period, and he is still managing the company currently. So what about the strategy? We've seen that the textile becomes a priority and the shareholders open a small part of their capital to a new entrant, Sandbridge Capital, to help them on this strategy. This investment fund, Sandbridge Capital, is based in the United States, and they support the creation of a subsidiary dedicated to clothing. Another strategy is oriented on external growth to rapidly develop its offer on other activity and create internal synergies. The director proceeded with various acquisitions in the outdoor sector. The objective is clear. It is necessary to diversify the group's activity in order to free itself from the dependence on winter sports. An information important is actually Time and Red Light are no longer belonging to the company as they have been sold recently. The first strategy is internationalization. There is this progressive internationalization towards China in anticipation of the Winter Olympics in 2022. Once again, the shareholders are selling a part of the capital to a market specialist named IDG Capital Partners in order to benefit from his experience. So now let's see how the sports culture and the sports area are influencing the strategy. We can approach the strategy relative to the cultural and sporting contingency first by the competitive sports culture, which belong to Rossignol. We notice that Rossignol culture is based on a culture of performance, and because the ski must be the best on the slopes to descend as fast as possible. So they are created for the competition and to win every second on the race. So according to the culture, the employees' expectations are high toward the products, which encourage the cooperation inside the department and in favor of the innovation. There is also a strong presence of the research and development department that coordinates many departments for producing the innovation. Then about sports area, we can focus on this playground, which is in the streets. We're speaking about ski resorts, because yes, we observe that ski resorts are a fundamental resource for the groups, but the problem is that they have been in danger for many years because of global warming. So it leads the group to diversify with different brands, as we have seen before. And what's interesting here is that when the groups buy the red light brand, it takes possession of a very interesting concept, the 4-season resorts that propose sports area for trail, for Nordic walking, ski touring, and mountain biking. And later, when the brand Red Light was sold, the Rossignol group decided to keep this concept and even improve it with additional employees and additional sports area in relation with the commune. So it demonstrates the group's interest in sports tourism and the interest for co-designing the sports area in collaboration with the public. Now let's move on the second case study, the Quicksilver brand, and quickly a brief history. Quicksilver board shorts were invented by Alan Green in 1969 in Australia, and they are immediately very successful and are marketed through all the country. Then the brand is quickly exported to the USA in 1976 and to Europe in 1985. The brands progress rapidly and then diversify also on different brands to conquer new consumers, more younger, or to conquer the women consumers. And the turnover is really impressive. We can see that it's multiplied by 7 between 1995 and 2002. So at this period, nothing seems to stop the Quicksilver growth until they buy Rossignol. So we have seen this tragic event, and the Quicksilver brands does not recover from this operation. So in 2015, Quicksilver went through a bankruptcy, and Oak Tree Capital Management reinvest in the company to save it. They take control of the company and change the general identity in 2017 by regrouping the brands under the name of Boardriders. The following years, they decided to buy GSM Group that hold different brands like Billabong, Luca, and Element. And this operation involved a big merger between all these brands, and the new identity of Boardriders is definitely positioned as a leader on the market. So basically on the strategy is really concentrating on the growth agenda. The Boardriders Group is guided by the investment fund that is carrying this merger. The merger between these brands is a major step in the history of the group that requires a lot of integration and optimization. About the sports culture contingency, we've seen that the brands of the Boardriders groups are inspired from the surf culture, oriented on travel and the desire for individualization. We assume that this dimension leads the brands to open up more quickly to the international market through the brand licensing. There is also a subsequent uprooting of the parent company, and the business is then separated into 3 global areas: the Americas, the Europe, Middle East and Africa, and the Asia Pacific. Also, we observed that within the teams, the management require more guidance from the manager. They have to apply stricter performance standards. And there is also an independence of the brands between them. About sports area, the company shows very ambitious decision towards the construction of wave pools. They announced in the first time the project of a wave pool behind the headquarters of Saint-Jean-de-Luz. This decision will not be achieved for several reasons, like the opposition of a local association, the crisis of the COVID, and the required investment. However, they engaged a partnership with the company Wave Garden in order to be present on the first wave pool created in Switzerland against the backdrop of the Swiss Alps. As you can see on the picture, the retail team is on site with a big store to promote products on this new type of sports area and sports facility. As a conclusion, we could observe and affirm that the cultural and sporting contingency influence the management and coordination between departments, but it's also leading organization to undertake the sports area concern. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Pierre. I really appreciate that. It's a lot of knowledge and information. My first set of skis was Rossignol. So I know more now about Rossignol than I ever did before. That's great. I want to make certain people are keeping track of questions that they may have as we work through our 4 presentations. I'm actually going to now share my screen, if I can, and let me go to the presentation here. Okay, can you see that? Is that good? Yeah, okay. My talk is going to be quite different than my colleagues. This is an exploratory paper. And what I'm looking at is the issue of buying and selling the body at the intersection of sport tourism and sex tourism. I am working on this project with a PhD student she is finishing up her PhD at Berkeley this summer, Rachel Roberson, but she cannot join us because she just bought a puppy and she had to take it in for its final shots this morning. What I'd like to talk first about is what our research questions are. The first question is there empirical evidence to support a connection between sport tourism and sex tourism? And second, is there a conceptual understanding of why the attributes and behaviors of sports tourists and sex tourists, that is the demand side of the industry, not the supply side, but the demand, might support a theoretical, if not empirical connection? So these are our 2 research questions. And I will begin with the first. Is there empirical evidence to support a connection between sport tourism and sex tourism? The purpose of this paper is to address these questions and drawing on the literature related to both sport tourism and sex tourism, particularly where modern tourism has been seen and written about as a colonial project and process. So let's start with the first question, and let's begin on a Sunday in the United States. As you probably all know, one of the biggest mega sporting events in the United States domestically is what we call the Super Bowl. It is the final game of the American Football League, the National Football League. And it happens every year in January or February, and it has been called by the media many, many times the largest human trafficking event on the planet. And what happens in the United States is that every city that hosts this will end up beginning a public campaign against sex trafficking, oftentimes making the illicit connection between both sport and sex tourism. And it becomes oftentimes very dramatic. The mayors and the senators will come out and say things about how we have to stop this. We have to stop bringing children from Guatemala and using them for sex trafficking. So, of course, the NFL denies that there is any connection, calling it an urban legend and pointing to a lack of evidence, while pledging to work with local law enforcement to address trafficking. But the idea again is that the mega sporting events is luring tourists, sports tourists, to cities, and they also at that time will engage in the hiring of commercialized sex. But the NFL says there is no such evidence, and this is just something that has been created to create drama. The fact is, however, that it's not just a North American phenomenon. This is a situation that has been publicized widely around the world, that there is a working assumption that global mega sporting events, the Olympics, the FIFA World Cup, and others also are connected in some ways to the promotion of sex trafficking. And I don't know why that's not moving forward. However, despite all of the media attention, the law enforcement measures, and the efforts by prostitution abolitionist groups, there is in fact no empirical evidence to support trafficking for prostitution is increased around large sporting events. None whatsoever. However, it continues to be a common sense belief that it exists in the Olympics. Similar discussion about how many prostitutes have gone to South Africa or to France or in order to serve the sport tourists that come for a mega sporting event. Again, no empirical evidence has been demonstrated around specifically sex trafficking. But it's important to recognize that sex trafficking is the most obscene version of what might be considered sex work. So we will come back to this. Where we want to go next, however, is there some conceptual reason why there actually may be a connection between sport tourism and sex tourism, or sport tourists and sex tourists? And where we are analyzing and looking at the literature is how these two areas of the larger tourism industry are focused on labor-informed bodily commodification. That is, that both instances involve a performative body that has been commodified and therefore consumed, such that it has a use value and an exchange value. So we're looking at the Venn diagram here, where these two areas might conceptually and empirically overlap. So let's look first at the sport tourism and sport tourist. It's interesting because IRNIST has worked very diligently over the course of the last 10 years to define what sport tourism is. This is taking a definition that is much more political as opposed to technical or scientific. It's utilizing the work, say, of Sykes, who calls roving colonization as something tied to sport tourism, where the political and economic processes and corresponding impact of the temporary, mostly first world or global north occupation of a non-Westernized space of industry. The themes motivationally that might drive a sport tourist based upon the literature are aesthetic, eustress, entertainment, escape, and group affiliation. This is actually where the work of Professor Bouchet and his 4E model around meaning and arousal could be quite interesting as we develop this a little further. Now let's look at the sex tourism and the sex tourist. Also, there's a great body of decolonial scholars who think sex tourism is an industry fueled by the legacy of colonization, where the body has been framed as a commodity and a natural, or i.e. native resource that is utilized and or used by the first world individuals who come to take advantage of individuals who are in these formerly colonized areas. And the motivational themes underlying a sex tourist are similar in some ways to what is in the literature around sports tourism. The motivations are around fantasy, escape, power, liberation, and or upholding a particular status. So what we're really interested here in conceptually is, are there motivational attributes that individuals who are both sport or who are sport tourists might be more likely to engage in because of the qualities that they possess around their interest in sport as a fan or as a spectator? So let us look at labor, for example, and labor commodification and exploitation. I refer to Marx here from Wage, Labor, and Capital, where he writes that labor power is a commodity neither more or less than sugar. The former is measured by the clock, the latter by the scales. And when you think about both sport tourism and sex tourism, it is very much measured by the clock, both in terms of performance, in terms of sport action, but also in terms of the temporal qualities of a game, an event, and or an encounter. So the argument we're proposing is that athletic labor and sex work both have a use value that can be exchanged for money or other products of like value. And as an exchangeable use value, this form of labor becomes commodified. It comes reified and commodified and therefore consumed. So from the overarching issue around tourism, these are both areas where the body becomes something that is adorned and or adored. So the consumption of the body in the institution of sport is commercialized sport as a bodily labor industry. Sex industry is also commercialized sex as a bodily labor industry. And in the case of sports, spectators or fans, which comes from the word fanatics, control, adore, and adorn athletes' bodies. That is the fans' gaze onto their favorite athlete or athletes or team. They literally wear the jersey of another individual with their name on their back. They put the individual's body in essence onto themselves. Or in fantasy sports, we see that they actually own teams. They trade individuals. They control their own essential body of a sports team made up of other bodies. In the sex industry, we have clients who are controlling, fantasizing, and using, obviously, the sex worker's body, whether they themselves are dominating or they are asking to be dominated. It is also important to note that this is not only, although it is primarily, a male domain as the demand of sports tourism, but it is not only men. We certainly know that women are strong supporters both in the institution of sport as fans and spectators, as well as consumers of sex work. The theoretical grounding that we are using conceptually is the colonial matrix of power, or what is called CMT. And it outlines the ways in which positionality and ways of knowing, or epistemologies, are manipulated to serve capital-driven aims of colonial powers, or the global north, or the first world. Within this matrix of power, race, class, gender, and sexuality are reframed as sources of capital with a particular material or use value, thereby enabling colonized bodies to be consumed. So this is, and I can't go into great detail here, but there's a lot of literature around the colonial matrix of power. Similarly, we're using as a conceptual grounding what is called the libidinal economy. And many authors have talked about the libidinal economy, but it is essentially the distribution and arrangement of desire and the complex relationships between sexuality and the unconscious. It represents systems of exchange for fantasies, desires, fears, aversions, and pleasure. So we look at the libidinal economy and the colonial matrix of power as epistemological ways in which the first world or global north has ultimately believed that they can own and control resources, including bodies, from other parts in the world that they have previously dominated and or colonized. So a return to the research question is there empirical evidence to support a connection between sport tourism and sex tourism? So the answer initially with our study is no, when it comes to sex trafficking. That does not mean that there is not some empirical evidence to support this connection. And our research agenda is to actually look at that in the future in a way to actually try to get at this question. And that may be difficult, but we are engaging in different research models that may allow us to find this out. Again, not sex trafficking, but actual agentic and mutually beneficial engagement of commercialized sex with sport tourists. But again, the question for this paper we're really trying to determine is, might we make an argument that there's a conceptual understanding of why the behaviors and attributes of sports tourists and sex tourists support a theoretical connection, and why it might be the case that there is something to be explored here that has not been to date. So the future directions is, does a possible conceptual relationship exist? And if so, can we ultimately look at the empirical evidence, which means that we would focus from this paper, focus on demand to supply, and to look at both aspects of the industry and not only the motivations of the tourists themselves, but those who are providing the tourism opportunity and experience. Thank you, I appreciate that. I will stop sharing my screen and come back to the group. Okay. It is, let's see, it is 8 in my time in California. It is 8:42. We had 4 great presentations. I'd like to open it up now to any questions people have about particular presentations. I see Eva has her hand up, so please, Eva.
Yes, just 2 words because I must leave now. Yes, you have a question at the end of your presentation. You say, is there any empirical example to connect sex tourism and sport tourism? If you remember, during the soccer network, soccer World Cup in Germany, there was a scandal because the biggest brothel in Europe opened just before the World Cup, just nearby the main stadium in Berlin. And I think it's a kind of evidence of what you say.
I think it's interesting that I didn't go into detail, but what's funny, I brought up the Super Bowl, and for those of you who follow American football, which is a horrible sport, by the way, but if you do, the Super Bowl owners of the New England Patriots right after the Super Bowl this past year, was arrested for utilizing a prostitute. So while the league was saying there's no connection, the actual owner of the team that won the Super Bowl was actually arrested for soliciting a prostitute. So I think there's a connection too. And I think it has to do with power and control. Eva.
Yes, Derek. Your contribution and presentation just remind me the big scandal during the halftime Super Bowl in 2004. It was the very well-known performance of Janet Jackson with Justin Timberlake, right? And the second, my point is that here we have in Europe the night. So my friends who are interested to watch the Super Bowl just stay over the night wake up, and they go to bars. And so it's connected to watch during the night the Super Bowl in the bar and sports bar. So it has also this context.
Yeah,
so that's all. Thank you.
It's funny that you remember the Janet Jackson where her pasty fell off of her dress and it made such a scandal. In the United States, the most popular sports magazine is called Sports Illustrated. And for many years, the way that they sold subscriptions to the magazine were two main things. And it was mostly a male audience. One was the most dramatic and awful hits that people would make on one another on the field where they would, get crushed, and the swimsuit edition that would have scantily dressed women who had small bikinis. That was how they sold the magazine. So yeah, I think there's a connection between sport and sex. But don't just ask me questions. We had wonderful other presentations. I mean, I would love to hear, I don't know if Professor Bouchet is still with us, but I was thinking when he was talking about the model he was talking about around arousal and aesthetics, to ask the question about some of the research I'm doing as well. But other questions for Pierre, for Eva, for
I think I had a question from Irena.
Oh yes, thank you. Yes.
She was asking if I used to work in sports organization like Rossignol. So yes, indeed, I used to work in my previous experiences in some store distribution, but unfortunately not in a Rossignol, neither Boardriders. That would be interesting to have more private insight. But yes, I used to work in other brand and other organization like this. Just to respond to Irene.
Well, yes, thank you. Why I ask, because it is always very good to be inside of events. And you can have closer contacts with people. They are more open in their opinion and so on and so on. So I really appreciated your work a lot. And it's clear that you can now help other companies to establish some business and to be oriented towards successful areas. Yes, it's my opinion, but I am not a specialist in this area. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But yes, you say right, because I felt that it was a bit secret. Some topics was secret. So indeed, it's important to stay close to the field.
Yeah, it's so. Thank you.
Thanks.
I also think you have a very interesting research area and agenda. I think it's very practical and useful also for the business of sports. I wonder, Irina, if you had a comment or question to Eva, since you've done similar work in the Czech Republic.
I have. If I may, because we choose very similar towns for the research. Both towns are located in areas with problems in industry because they were found on heavy industry. And when we asked in IRNIST project if people want to come back to the city, there was no interest because nothing is in this town to be seen. But Eva discovered that people want to go back, but there was for me unclear if they want to come to the region around Ostrava because there are mountains and there are also some natural areas, or directly to the Ostrava, because in Ostrava I am not interested in this. So Eva, what do you mean?
Thank you for questions. I check my data. The very important variable in my study is that relatively high percentage of respondents were the local people. So for them, it's automatically intent to come back because this is very close. And the second variable or this is limitation that I checked the question in the survey, that was the question about coming back to destination. So it was not specified, it was city or destination, meaning the region. And the third fact is that Irena mentioned that the Ostrava, the city, what was my research conducted, it's characteristic by the heavy industry, but it's not true anymore. There were some coal minings in the past, but it's not more valid more than 20 years. And this is still Ostrava city, but the industry is used as the attraction now. So, and I had opportunity to visit the Ústí last year, and there is the big heavy chemical industry.
Yeah.
So at the first sign, or from my view, now they are no more comparable, these two cities. And as I said, this big influence has the percentage of local participants from neighborhood and from regions around. And that was not precise, the questions returning back to the city or to the region. So still, there was the statement from 62% of respondents that they are intent to come back in the future. But I have the pointed that was intent. You know, I don't have any tools how to prove if they really came back or not.
Yeah. Maybe the difference is caused by the fact that visitors of Matony-Ústí nad Labem marathon were from the 70% from other regions, mostly from Prague, not from Ústí nad Labem and its surroundings. So it's also this explication which can be used.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I also check my contribution, what I presented in Zagreb at the IRNIST conference in 2016. It was my contribution about survey conducting in half marathon, which is also one of the small regional race. Which is included in the all series Matony marathons or half marathons. There is the series names, it's Runfest, and there I had 25% of participants which were from local or neighbor, and also they were not so intent to come back because these are typical runners and they just attend this series, each city.
They circulate around this.
Yes, they circulate. But this Runfest Ostrava has big tradition, and these are runners who really just they have some, how to say, tradition to come back and
to feeling of a connection to the place.
Yeah.
It's interesting because in the book that we found, the popularity of running worldwide has grown extensively, and one of the reasons is the diversification of different races. So as you pointed out, Eva, there's not just the half marathon, there's multiple different events taking place during this larger event. And while the gender differences are clear in the half marathon, as of last year, 2020, in the world, women have outpaced men in terms of running events. There are more women now running in events in the world than men, which is the first time ever in history. But it breaks down very differently depending upon the length and the type of events, trail races, 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon, and so forth. I wanted to see if Professor André Suchet, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, wanted to add anything. I hadn't seen him on the Zoom earlier, but he is working with Pierre.
Thank you to the attention, and sorry for my presence in alternative moment between deliberation and other thing for the faculty.
Thank you. Welcome. We have just a couple of minutes. Are there any other pressing questions that anyone might have?
Hello, everybody. Derek.
Hi, Olivier.
Thank you for all presentation. I have a question for you, Derek. What is the importance of the colonization between sport tourism and sex tourism? What is the importance, the impact of the colonization about this situation?
So I think that the argument we're trying to make is that there is an epistemology, a way of thinking that ultimately has to do with control and domination of resources, that colonizers have tended to believe that parts of the world and or people of those worlds are ultimately property or could be property. So what we see in sports, in global sports, is the recruitment and or the purchase of athletes from formerly colonized areas into different teams or countries and national teams, in the same sense that the process of sex work and or travel to, you're from an island, Reheenen, right? Islands, for example, in the Caribbean are very well known as sex tourism locations. Not only, again, for men, for women, but women to take advantage of male sex workers or prostitutes. So there's a way in which the first world or the global north uses formerly colonized spaces to benefit their own interest and consumption. I hope that helps to answer the question.
Thank you, Derek.
Wonderful. I see that Barbara is back, and Barbara is the master of ceremonies. She is the guru of the conference, and I hand it back to you, Dr. Maza.
Okay, thanks, Derek. See you tomorrow morning in the plenary room at 10:50, because at 11 we have the presentation of Riccardo Melo as keynote. I wish everyone a good rest and thank all the keynotes, convenors and speakers who spoke today and who made this working day very interesting and stimulating. Thanks to everyone and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
See you tomorrow to all.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Bye.